Hi everyone, Tea Drinker here, and today I'm delighted to say that I am finally reacting, not just reviewing, reacting to Black Sails, Season 3, Episode 3. Oh, this has been coming a long time. So I have not seen a new episode of Black Sails in 3 weeks now because I had a backlog of the previous episode reviews to do, and I will try to get as many edited reactions for Black Sails done as I can, but I will definitely be maintaining the reviews because to me, when it comes to me eventually setting up my own channel, I would like to see it to be primarily a review channel with the reactions kind of a secondary thing, but hey, who knows, by the time I start doing these reactions and seeing what I look like on camera, that could 100% change. So I guess there's no other way to go about this other to say that I'm so excited to see what is going to happen with this story. That's way too much of a preamble. I'm excited to get into seeing what's finally going to happen with the story. The last episode was the sailing into the storm with Flint and Teach arriving to the island and meeting Vane. That's what happened last time. I'm really excited to see what the continuation for this is going to be. And okay, let's do it. Very first Black Sails reaction. Let's just fucking go. Where are we? Oh, they're selling the gold in order to be able to maintain it easier. Oh, lovely.
Illiterate negress.
Wow.
Is there no end to the surprises this place
Jesus.
has to offer? What the fuck did he just say? I understand she can dress as a civilized woman, but to behave as one,
Oh.
that is impressive.
Fuck.
We are dead men.
I would suggest that we draw up two lists.
Oh.
One with the names of the men critical to sailing this ship once the wind returns. The second, the men who aren't.
Oh, fuck.
You think we should feed some of the men more than others?
No, I think we should feed some of the men and not others.
Jesus.
The survival of the greatest number of men on this crew rests entirely on our ability to maneuver this ship to land.
They portray a desperate situation so
We need to
well.
keep a close eye on him.
Come on, Billy, question him. Come on, Flint. Be a good man, I believe in you.
The strategy involved in coordinating this fleet will be...
That's enough. You sit down. And the rest
Love
of
you, Jack.
Please listen closely. That said, if you're going to behave like children, then I will be your daddy. When this meeting breaks, I will
Oh,
address
Jack.
the fleet, your crews.
You're asking him to trust me.
It doesn't matter.
Love Billy being the voice of reason. What the fuck is Flint gonna do? Okay, that's one way of dealing with it, I guess. Jesus.
Thank you. Oh, dear God.
He's gonna kill him as well, isn't he? The mad fucking cunt. Or is he just gonna beat him within an inch of his life? Come on, Sylvie, come on. Oh my god. Oh, shit.
Forgive me.
Forgive me. And that's why I record these reactions.
Does anyone have anything to say?
Oh my god. Imagine then he turned around and said, oh, and by the way, I took the rations. What are you gonna do? I'm the captain. Oh, but joking aside, that was absolutely terrifying. That was insanity. Oh, Flint. It's okay. I mean, it's really not. It's the furthest thing from okay as one could get, but I'm gonna take care of you, birdie. I'm in no mood to look at gals being pals. I want to give Flint a hug.
Let it be now, so we may not live in fear of it.
Oh, Anne. This episode is breaking my heart. This is hell.
Maybe he is dangerous to us in this state.
Yeah, you think? This more so than any other TV show I've ever seen, I would love to see turned into a book series and get a lot more lore to everything. I'd read every page.
I'm ruined over you.
Oh, Flint.
The part of you that always existed, yet never were you willing to allow into the light of day.
Oh my god, this is brilliant.
And at its end lies the answer you refuse to see.
Where's the end gonna be for Flint? I shouldn't have asked that. I don't like seeing death. No thank you.
Let's go.
What a great throwback to 201, where they were the two men to board the ship. Show does a great job of parallels like that.
Wasn't entirely true.
How much are they doing this episode?
You were deceived.
This is insane. I love not seeing Flint's face in the build-up to this. Flint isn't gonna do shit.
Well, I am as an invalid.
Yeah, just as Flint predicted. I've never been so happy to see a CGI shark. Don't break. Oh, Flint.
Again?
You fucking mad bastard. I don't think we've seen Sylvie with his shirt off before.
What happened out there? Progress.
Yeah. Oh, there's a little bit of wind.
How many ships?
Looks to be 8, maybe 9.
Okay, this is happening now.
Hours, give or take, till they're near. Let's get the men aboard ship.
How much is happening in the one episode?
Someone have her removed. I don't have time for this. What are you suggesting?
So rude.
That you go to read the address?
There shall be a bounty of 10,000 pounds sterling.
And a bounty.
For the capture of the pirate Charles Vane.
Are they going to rebel against Hornigold now? Oh!
Captain?
Really? I was not expecting that. Oh, I was not expecting that. That is a spanner in the works. Where the heck are they? Oh, damn. The others. Black Sails! They put so much into that episode, it's ridiculous. Okay, that's the very first reaction to Black Sails finished, and this will now probably be cutting into the review. So if it is, then that's that. Or if this ends up being used as the ending of the video, then this is the ending of the video. But it'll most likely be the review, which will start now. Okay, so our opening scene in which we see Max and Anne exchanging the money in order to get pearls so that it is a lot easier to transport and just basically safeguard. There's more of a consequence of the scene which I'll deal with in a second, but first of all I just want to address the scene in which the man they're dealing with makes very uncomfortable comments to do with Max's race in this particular scene. What I liked about the inclusion of scenes like that, because of course we had that with Mr. Scott in Season 1, is it does illustrate the lives that these characters may have possibly had to go through just in order to get to this particular junction. With the character of Max, though we don't know explicitly what her life may have been like as a person of colour up until this point, small moments such as those do a good job of illustrating the backstory just by giving us a less is more effect, but kind of more so a better analogy is it's an iceberg effect. If what we're seeing here is just the things that are on the surface, then Lord only knows what it is Max has had to go through in general just to be here at all. So stuff like that I think is really, really strong from a world building point of view. following that, we see the exact consequences of Max and Anne being told that the governor is on his way to Nassau. We see Jack, Featherstone, and Vane, the five of them, all join together trying to find out what the best course of action is. And it's at this point where Jack makes the decision that if we have all our available crews stand guard at the exact same time, then we will intimidate Hornigold to back off. So I think that these two short scenes tied together, they create very strong setups for the characters in this episode, the first of which being Max and Anne, who we know are trying to work together to secure a life for themselves, kind of post-Nassau, if you will, because they see that their time is running out. And then, of course, we have the characters of Featherstone, Vane, and in particular Jack, who now have to not necessarily lead a charge, but defend themselves against the advances of Hornigold. I think at this particular point, it is good to see Jack, who is seemingly climbing the ranks, so to speak. Jack is very much reinforcing his position, not necessarily as a force to be reckoned with, but definitely as a strong leader in this type of situation, and just in general, a strong character, both of Nassau and of the TV show itself. So, yeah, that's it. So, as I mentioned a couple of times, one of the things the show does really, really well is using the transitions between scenes as a way of either giving us exposition or reinforcing the previously established exposition. So, at the end of this scene in which Elle is speaking to the governor says, so long as we take the fort, everything should be fine. And then we get the J cut of audio of Teach saying, "We are all dead men," which of course is underlying the premise that because the episode has specifically given us a character saying everything will be fine, that's presenting a pattern that, yeah, things are not going to be fine. And having Teach say we are all dead men leading into the next scene pretty much confirms that for us as the audience. I think it is very interesting to see, as I said in the previous episode's review, how Elle is really going out of her way to show her political muscle here. It could be argued that when her back is up against the wall, there's little else she could do. But nonetheless, she is very, very much maintaining her composure throughout the entirety of this. And we learn that the main reason for the governor wanting to do this is not necessarily for the benefit of England directly, but more so that he is fearing the wrath of Spain, were he not to try to secure the Uncle Dua Lipa's gold to the best manner that he can, and of course maintain some shape or form of civility in Nassau. So basically we know that regardless of whatever England is going to do in the future, Spain is going to be directly behind that. So we've replaced kind of like in front of the mountain coming towards us, there is also the Everest behind that. So if we can deal with the mountain, then hopefully that will put the Everest at bay. And that's pretty much all I have to say about this short scene. Again, just really, really impressed by Eleanor's acting as per usual. And I think it does a really good setup for her character in this episode, showing how it is she's going to navigate the political position that she now finds herself within. Next, we get the absolutely fantastic scene of Billy, Sylvie, and Flint in the room discussing how they are going to draw up two lists, one for men who will get rations and then the other for those who can't, as it means their best chance of survival. I think this scene, first of all, did a terrific job of adding a real sense of tension to the storyline. You could even see in my reaction just how completely taken aback as I was at the suggestion that Flint would even think of something like this, but of course, it is for the best. Better some of them to live than none of them whatsoever. And then we have, of course, Sylvie standing up to him, as has been kind of building and building at the previous two episodes, and Sylvie really trying the best he can to reason with him. But he is up against a wall, not necessarily the wall being Flint himself, but just the situation they find themselves in. And as much as I do love Sylvie for doing that, Billy really did come in as being the voice of reason in this situation. Billy is really coming across as the adult in the room in a lot of ways, as he usually does. I think once Sylvie is left in the episode does a great job, first of all, of displaying to us as the audience how much Flint is rationalizing his own decisions. And of course, that's kind of the setup for his episode arc, in a way, is his encounterance both with the hallucinations and, of course, of Sylvie himself. Him specifically saying the word hallucinations, knowing what's going to come up in the scene where he shoots the crewman. Again, just a really great planting of the seed that the episode does. Alongside the expository scene transitions that the show does so well that I referenced in the previous scene. What I also love about the show is the way it plants seeds like these, and it's what I believe makes the show so worth rewatching, not only on an episode basis, but I'm sure on an entire season and series basis as well. Just a fantastic scene, as they all are really at this point. It's hardly a point I need to reiterate, but look, I just gotta say it each time because each time it just so happens to be true. So, our scene in which Jack is addressing the room full of captains and their respective quartermasters and detailing to them their plan to put up a defense line on the beach in order to intimidate the Navy. I gotta say, it's great watching Jack kind of take control so much, his character doing that, even though it ends up being thwarted by Teach towards the end of that scene. Nonetheless, it does really speak to the degree of confidence and tenacity that Jack is really operating as his role in Nassau at this point. It's very much, in so many ways, we really do see his character is definitely one that is just constantly moving 2 steps forward and then 1 step back. Teach showing up and announcing to the men that Flint is dead is definitely that step back. But nonetheless, it is progress. And I think having it done in a way that's so deliberate is very satisfying for us at the audience. It's like he's constantly coming up against that midpoint at which he has to recoup and then try to put his best foot forward in the best way that he can in order to progress, both with regards to the actual plot and then his character and really coming into his own as Jack Rackham. Now, I haven't read anything online or anything like that. I haven't looked at any discussion. I'm just basing this on my own interpretation that the series arc for Jack Rackham is that it is going to end with him achieving his sense of legacy, but it is going to come at an absolutely enormous price. I'm really hoping it's not Anne. I think it will most likely have to be a case where he either gets his legacy or he gets Anne, but not both, but I guess time will tell. The following scene, in which Teach and Vane are speaking to one another, is really, really interesting. So Teach does a little bit of a dressing down of Vane, talking about how commitment is your burden, not Nassau itself, but who you are inside and the way that you are clinging, that is your burden. And that for as much as you can place your trust in Jack, which Vane does, Teach brings up the point that Jack is the type of person who clings to you simply because you are stronger, and that if you suddenly become weak and then there's a stronger person to cling to, Jack will do that too. Whether or not that's wrong of Jack to do is debatable, I guess, but the point being driven there is that Vane is in a certain way still a slave to, one could argue, his own stubbornness, his own proclivity to cling to that in which he views as being secure, but is only going to be as secure as, I guess, the strength of others, not necessarily the strength of himself. So it then leads to Vane asking the million-dollar question, which is, why are you asking all of this of me specifically, and why are you doing it now as opposed to in the past? And Teach brings up a really strange moment that I did not see coming, where he basically alludes to the notion that he would see himself as being a father figure to Vane, given the fact that he had 9 wives and no sons, and that usually you don't ask consent of your son to be a part of your life, but he finds himself having to ask the same of Vane. I'm not entirely sure if there's something I'm missing here. Perhaps there's a level of subtext and more, not even necessarily subtext, but just there being an implication that both of them need to survive in this world and they both need one another. But the reason why Teach is looking for someone like Vane in particular is that he can kind of model him as some sort of father-son dynamic, but of course given the fact that Vane is very much an adult and very much the type of person who is able to recognize Teach, that he has that emotional intelligence and also just social awareness. Vane would be able to see through it right away, let alone when Vane is pretty much saying it to him that explicitly. So at this juncture, I don't really know what's happening there, but it's certainly grabbed my attention, to say the least. Following that, we get a really, really great scene that I actually kind of missed the first time around because I was still I had it in my head about what Teach and Vane were speaking about, that I wasn't fully grasping the dialogue. We have that lovely moment between Jack and Anne where it's made quite clear that Vane will be going with Teach, at least at this particular juncture. And Jack wonders why it is that he's going to miss Vane. He's aware that Vane was somewhat of a confidant, in the sense that Vane would have the capacity to tell Jack when his shit stinks, to which Anne says there's plenty of men who have followed Vane's advice for the purpose of becoming a proper pirate, whereas Jack is the only one who has built himself an entire career. So I think that's kind of a really lovely moment, in the sense that in a way she's giving high praise to both men while still kind of acknowledging a possible shortcoming of Jack for that fact. She's able to recognize the indisputable knowledge that Vane has, as well as the willingness of Jack to grow and learn from Vane. But of course she is able to kind of deprecate him just a tiny bit and saying, well, you're just as stupid as any of those other men. You're just smart enough to have actually succeeded in a way that they couldn't. So, but of course, that in and of itself is something that requires willingness to grow and to learn and to get a career out of it, because look, at the end of the day, Jack pulled it off. So in a way, that small little interaction was a really good way of kind of, I suppose for lack of a better way of putting it, she was kind of kicking him in the balls, but also patting him on the head at the same time. And, well, maybe that just really describes Anne as the type of person she is. Our scene in which Billy confronts Sylvie to take the rations, and Sylvie is cutting up the eels, wow, is really all I can say. We get resolution for the moment in season 2 in which Sylvie says to Flint, "It must be awful being you." That is a moment that clearly has stuck in Sylvie's head, because now he's speaking about Flint's ability of conjuration, the idea that this is a man who is able to create a state of reality with his mind, to which the crewmen are then forced to live within that reality. And this might have mild spoilers for Attack on Titan. It'll only be in this scene that I discuss it. I'll try to do so briefly. But the idea that Sylvie considers Flint to be engaging in this sort of chaos and this sort of darkness as a means to an end of making sure that there are no more witnesses following what happened with Vane, the Ford, and of course Miranda dying. It really shows that Sylvie is very, very clear-headed about all this, and he is truly frightened of Flint at this point. He's frightened to the point of being so nihilistic, of giving up hope altogether, of him truly being in that rock and hard place between whether or not he should or should not even stand up to Flint, and what the effect of him confronting Flint is going to be for the rest of the crewmen for that happening. And Billy, God bless him, he is correct. Billy is correct. Billy is correct in trying to maintain the peace and trying to do their best to acquiesce the whole situation to the best of his ability. But Sylvie gets it. he gets Flint in a way nobody else does. Sylvie is probably the only person who truly understands what is going inside Flint's head, with the exception of Flint himself, Miranda, and us as the audience. And all three of those parties cannot do anything in this situation apart from Sylvie. So from a seasonal arc point of view, I think they are setting this up that Sylvie is going to have some moment of really getting under the mask of Flint, of just trying to appeal to James McGraw to the best of his ability. It's a very, very dark scene. A very, very profoundly dark piece of dialogue that we've just seen right there. So, our scene in which Flint is sobbing on the ground as the direct result of what just occurred on the ship deck. Well, I suppose to start with what happened on the ship deck, whether or not I saw something like that coming, I guess my reaction pretty much tells you the full story there. For him, I mean, again, it's a great payoff to the setup we got earlier of him talking about hallucinations and denying the fact that his mind is plagued with what happened to Miranda. It's a great kind of continuation of that particular arc. And again, him even then saying to Sylvie, if you're not strong enough to do what needs to be done, then I'll do it for you, was a great way of kind of progressing both of their episodic arcs, in the sense of Sylvie really is thwarted by the threat of Flint at this point, whereas Flint is really, really doubling down that he will take no prisoners, neither will he hear anything to do with his lack of efficacy as a captain. And of course, then him sobbing in the room. It's one thing to have a character who is so tortured that they don't know what's going on within their own head, that they are grasping in the dark for any shape or form of rope, and they're completely unaware of their situation. But then to have those brief moments of light in which the character can truly see how in the dark they are and how far down in that pit they are, such as that scene right there, is unbelievably, just profoundly dark. As I said in the review for 301, 302, I couldn't imagine Flint getting much darker, and I've no doubt in my mind that with 17 episodes left, that the worst is yet to come in that regard. But as it stands, with this arguably being one of the most distraught moments of Flint's character thus far, it's truly compelling. The scene with Max and Anne breaking up, I suppose, maybe if you want to put it that way, if that's the way you want to see it, could really be seen as a microcosm of what makes Black Sails so great. And indeed, when I spoke before about how so much of the show seems theatrical, in the sense that you could literally see it performed in the theatre, similar to Flint's monologue in 209, that scene truly does the job. But the reason why I say it acts as a microcosm for the quality of the writing, in that again, it's able to use the setup both of the actual plot situation and the character situation to create arcs for both of them, which again occur within the scene. So the two arcs being plot-wise, Max and Anne having their division of money, and then their actual division as people, and then the characterization arc in which Max was reminded of her state as a slave at the beginning of the episode. And Max recounts that story of how from her time as a slave, standing in filth literally outside of wealth, and how it taught her the value of peace, and how peace, were they to achieve it, must be one in which the two of them are made separate from one another. It's of course of the utmost importance to Max, but from a writing perspective, again, it kind of, in a way, makes that characterization fully formed, whilst creating a natural kind of conclusion to that arc as to what it is that she must do in order to secure herself a good life. And as for Anne, well, her arc is kind of self-evident there, her walking away and very softly saying, "I trust you," and daring to shed a tear in front of Max is a great sense of catharsis for the audience. Really great stuff. The short scene between Billy and Sylvie. I mean, what more could you say, really? Billy saying to Sylvie, "Gates had this figured out, as did the Barlow woman. Like, you need to be able to figure this out as well. You need to earn Flint's trust." To which Flint said, well, to which Sylvie replied, "Both of those people ended up dead." I mean, truly, the setup of a life or death choice for Sylvie. Either he finds some way to put his cards on the table in order for Flint to be able to come down from where he is mentally and view Sylvie as a voice of reason, as them being on the same level, or everyone is doomed. Because if the mantle is then going to fall to Billy to try to resolve this, frankly, all hell is going to break loose. It has to be Sylvie to do this. Very good setup. The scene in which Flint experiences a hallucinatory vision of Miranda speaking to him. Her talking about how she can guide him towards the end, but it is at the end where he will have to relinquish his release on her in order to move on, in order to gain a sense of peace, and how that will necessitate him interacting with a truth, however ready he may be to hear that truth. I think that when it comes to their interactions, I don't speak about them necessarily in the most deep way, simply because I feel a lot of it is either self-evident or, frankly, enough of it has been most likely said about it at this point, both by myself and others, that it doesn't necessarily require saying. But all the same, I will say, just having Miranda so explicitly say, and of course it's Flint saying it to himself via Miranda by medium of his subconscious, having it said so clearly that Flint was the person he had to become in order to alleviate himself of the shame for his love of Thomas, and the death of Miranda, the literal death of Miranda, happening mere moments after him getting ready to part ways with Captain Flint. And now the mask he's holding up is broken, and it's almost as if he's trying to shove the broken mask into his face itself, where it's bloody and bleeding and festering and now irremovable from him. Where does James end and Flint begin, and vice versa? It's remarkable that even just 3 episodes into the season, they have given us so much character introspection that other TV shows would do over the course of the entire season. And we're not even finished episode 3 yet. It is just absolutely stunning. I am in love with this show, and I truly, truly mean it. So Sylvie and Flint then going into the water in order to inspect the whale carcass. Before we get into kind of like the meat of that scene, I will just say at the beginning, when they're on the ship, looking through the lens at the whale, and Sylvie saying, "Both of us are the 2 men on full rations, it has to be us who go." I mentioned before that that's a great throwback to 201, when they were the 2 men to board the ship, but I also just, again, have to admire the conviction of Sylvie, and within the full context of what his character is going through, it really, it just illustrates the bravery that he has just so well. So the scene on the rowboat between Sylvie and Flint was a great conclusion to the specific arc both of them had. One with regards to Flint still seeing Sylvie as his rival, and then, of course, Sylvie's deception of Flint and his unwillingness to admit to the truth and to truly let his guard down. I think that the plan Sylvie had to wait until both of them were on the rowboat where no other men could interfere, and more importantly, Flint has to find a way to get back in one piece, was very much a stroke of genius on Sylvie's part there. It was, again, incredibly moving to see Sylvie really bears soul like that. And again, I said that it was a conclusion to a specific arc in the sense that Sylvie has finally seen himself as one of the crew. He is truly, truly putting himself into the face of death itself in order to protect these crewmen. And more importantly, accepting the fact that he understands he is an invalid without the approval of the crew, without their companionship. And I think for him to come to that moment of clarity in front of Flint, which I do believe it is a true moment of clarity, by the way. I think that with Flint having his guard up as to whether or not Sylvie is about to tell him any more lies, following Sylvie telling him the truth about the gold, there'd be no way for Sylvie to get away with lying. And I think also from a storytelling point of view, it would be too muddled if they try to do anything more complex on top of what is already a very, very complex dynamic. So to see Sylvie come to accept himself as nothing without the crew, and Flint able to accept himself as requiring Sylvie as much as Sylvie requires the crew, was very, very compelling and very cathartic for us as well. Of course, there is a lot to be said that they're not quite out of the woods yet. Even towards the end of the episode, Sylvie himself said that what happened today was progress, not conclusion, but the progress. But in and of itself, this was amazing to see. Following this, we then get a very entertaining and intense sequence in which both men discover that even though the whale is out of the question, they can still hunt shark together. And I spoke about how the rowboat scene was kind of the conclusion to the arc. Well, I suppose this could be seen as the true conclusion to the arc, insofar as an episodic structure goes, in which this is very much launching us into the third act of the characters having learned the nature of their true conflict, and now they're going through the process of like the boss fight, for lack of a better term, the final showdown in which they very much tackle the shark. The two boys, they work together, not as rivals, as partners, and they grab the shark and they they acquire food, which has been the inciting incident for the entire episode. And you saw it in my reaction, but Flint saying, like, again at the end of the scene, like that moment of dry humor from him at that moment is oh god, I just love it so much. I really, really do. I'm having a total blast with this show, if I haven't made that clear already. I really, really am. And then all of that, of course, being wrapped up really neatly with the men noticing that the wind has finally come. Love it. So our next scene, in which Elle is instructing the governor that it should be Hornigold who walks onto the beach, following two short setup scenes of showing that the ships are indeed approaching the harbour. I think it's so interesting given the fact that we are following both characters who are now at odds with each other, Elle versus Vane essentially, and that we know these characters so well that to see them plotting against one another is very, very entertaining, again similar to Flint and Vane in season 2. But again, this really kind of brings us further along the episodic arc for Elle, in which we see her flexing her political muscles even more, and her being very forthright and being the Eleanor Guthrie of this ship, the Eleanor Guthrie of the English Navy in this sort of sense. In terms of her character arc, it's very much a reinforcement rather than a change for her. But again, it's what's needed. You couldn't have her have a change arc at this particular juncture. I think it would be a bit contrived. Or at the very least, you could say that on a more seasonal arc perspective, it's one small contributing factor to a much larger change. But be that as it may, it was still very interesting to see how this room full of men is once again being thwarted by Eleanor. Really great stuff. And quite quickly, just as a build-up to the succeeding scene, having Teach saying whatever's going to happen, there's no stopping it now, alongside his caution that if we were to fire upon him, half the island will rebel against the other half. Knowing what's just about to happen in this episode itself is, again, really great creation of suspense for the audience, as well as leading to the unpredictability in that the character acknowledging that there could be the character acknowledging a potential outcome for us to then assume that the outcome won't happen and then for the outcome to happen anyway. I love that. And then, of course, that brings us to the scene where Hornigold is completely successful in being able to convince Vane's crew to go with him instead. And we don't know at this particular juncture how many men Vane has just lost, but this is truly a devastating blow to him. And given the fact that he was preparing to leave with Teach, I mean, is that still going to happen now? And he's leaving Jack and Anne and Featherstone and et al. To fend for themselves? Or is Vane going to stay put and try to thwart Hornigold to the best of his ability? I don't know what's about to happen there. I'm really looking forward to it. Again, all I gotta say is that when I first saw it, as you saw yourself, I was very much taken aback, taken by surprise. So, again, I love when the show does that. And then you had the final sequence in which we get a very interesting setup for the succeeding episode, in which our crew have just washed up in the middle of nowhere. They have no idea where they are. We have no idea where they are. All we know is that there is a pre-existing tribe living here, one of which we haven't actually seen the likes of in this show before, which is great because then it's giving us a little bit more of the world they're inhabiting and seeing what kind of other people are out there. And in general, I think that it is a very fitting end to this episode, in which, again, it's kind of like, you know, out of the pan into the fire, in the sense of they have just gotten through trying to live amongst themselves, and now here they are in a situation where they'll be forced to live amongst others. In other words, all the animosity and all the conflict came from the inner world, and now it's going to come from the outer world. But hey, now that Sylvie and Flint are partners, I guess I guess this will be like the beginning, the initial stages of a relationship, nearly. You know what I mean? This will be their first real fight as a couple, that kind of thing. And I'm sure the effects are going to be absolutely devastating for both men and just everyone involved. But all joking aside, this was just an absolutely fantastic episode. For my very first reaction to Black Sails, to be able to shoot with both the reaction and the review, I loved doing this. I really, really did. And in a lot of the reviews, I referenced how I wasn't entirely sure what my plans were going to be, how much of the edited reaction I'd include, if maybe there'd be some episodes where I'd be short for time. I'm not going to be short for time. I am going to make time for this. I started doing the reviews themselves in video format because I thought it would be shorter, because each review took about 3 hours to write up on the Patreon comments. And in total, the turnaround time to shooting a reaction and a subsequent review and then the editing, it's a lot more than 3 hours. And doing that per episode, it does eat into time. But you know what? Again, I love doing this. I truly, truly love doing this. And I'm excited to move forward, not only with Black Sails, but for future series as well. If this is just a beginning, I could only imagine how fun the journey is going to be. Particularly with Black Sails, in which, as of my time of recording, I still have 17 episodes left of the entire season, of the entire series rather, assuming that season 4 has 10. If there isn't, don't tell me, I want to figure that out by myself. But I don't think there's much more else to say. As soon as I've pressed stop on this recording, I'm going to take a short break and I'm going to get right into shooting 304. I'm so excited to see where this show goes. I want to thank you so much for watching, and if you've stuck around to the end, I want to give you an interesting fact. Might be nice to end these videos with an interesting fact for the observant of you and the patient of you, more than anything else, who stick around to the end. So here's your interesting fact. So a lot can be said about Michigan. It's a place a lot of people know, and it's a place that is home to at least one absolutely amazing person. And I'm sure that person knows who they are. But did you know that Michigan has a floating post office? The J.W. Westcott II, which was ordered in 1949, is a floating post office, the only one in the United States, and as such, it has its own floating zip code. It is the only floating zip code in the entirety of the United States. Why is it a floating post office? Well, it is a post office that is completely designed around a tugboat, and it is done so as a means to an end of delivering mail to the different harboring ships, the different freighters that are going to be around the Detroit Bay. And I think that that is a very interesting fact. I'm looking up, is there anything in particular of note about it? Oh yeah, and the way that they actually deliver the mail is done through using a system of ropes and buckets to deliver the mail to the freighters. There's your interesting fact. I might end each one of these videos with a little interesting fact, just for those of you who stick around to the end. Just make your day that little bit brighter. So, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.